Tonight on the In All Kinds Weather Forecast, the boys are back. The In All Kinds Weather Forecast is excited to talk about the upcoming football season. We recap the offseason, the big pickups, personnel losses, and we talk about things got to start looking up eventually for the Florida Gators. All the sights and sounds as we head into the fall camp season. This is the In All Kinds Weather Forecast. And welcome into another episode of the In All Kinds Weather Forecast. Returning as your host, I am Chris Yanes, alongside my co-host Neil Schulman. We are excited to be back together. We've got Gators football now here in the month of August, as we are 27 days away from kicking it off in the swamp against our arch rivals, the Miami Hurricanes. We've got a great show for you tonight, kind of recapping the off season and priming the fall camp that has already begun. But before we get into that, want to give a shout out to one of our newest sponsors, and that is 401k Generation. The In All Kinds of Weather Forecast is proudly sponsored by 401k Generation, the wealth management company that helps you invest today for your future tomorrow. Their team of advisors is committed to providing guidance and education for your 401k plan and its participants. And they also offer a range of enrollment solutions tailored to meet the unique needs of your company's 401k plan. Whether it's savings for your child's college, investment advice, or even your retirement, 401k Generation's team of advisors makes getting to know you their top priority. Our advisors will tailor a path to assist you in navigating life financial milestones and reaching your financial goals. 401k Generation, building stronger futures, one generation at a time. For more information, contact them at 866 998 5879 or visit their website at 401kgeneration.com. Very excited to have those guys on board there. And also want to give a shout out to University Traditions. As you all can see, I am wearing one of their newest hats, the white Florida Gators with
Oh, the 24 version of it.
the 24 version of it. And
Dang, that's nice.
we have an exciting announcement also, as we're going to be giving away one of these hats to one of our lucky fans. But in order to do that, you got to be doing three things. You got to be subscribed to the In All Kinds Weather Forecast YouTube page. We're going to ask that you like this show and leave a comment at the bottom. What is your feeling coming into fall camp and out of the summer? So we want to hear your thoughts on that. So if you subscribe to our show, like this show, and comment down below, that'll enter you for a chance to win one of these hats. Will be mailing it out to you before the season starts. We're going to be running this competition from now until August 24th, which is 1 week from the Miami game. So you'll be able to sport this great hat at our kickoff.
That hat is nice. I'm not gonna that's an orange box around it, right? It's hard to kind of see with the color.
Yeah, here, I'll
Yeah,
kind of
it's
lean a little bit to the camera. But
orange box around it, plain. And you know what the state of Florida outline looks almost like our OG logo that I designed when I was like not sleeping one night in college at 2:30 in the morning, and I only had like a very limited software to edit stuff on, so I created it. And it looked like it was created on paint, which it very well could have been. But that's a nice throwback to the OG logo, and it's a very, I mean, I have their old hats, University Tradition, so I can guarantee that they have good quality stuff. So if this is the same quality, it's going to be a real nice fit.
definitely is definitely one of those kind of old school styles. Also has the blue rope there across. So and it's one size fits all, so you can adjust in the back, like some other hats that they've done in the past. And it's a great place, great partners we have there at University Tradition. So make sure you're subscribed to the show, like this show, and comment down below your thoughts coming out of the off season and into training camp. All right. So let's get to what we want to talk about tonight, and that is kind of recapping the off season and talking about the stories going into fall camp. And it really has, as always, there is never an off season where there isn't short for stories, even when it's sort of downtime. Of course, I think one of the big stories coming out of spring camp and into the summer had to have been the Jaden Rashada saga when he decided to sue Billy Napier along with some other parties from the University of Florida. some of which are no longer there. But as Neil reported even recently on the All Kinds of Weather website, is that they're looking to get that case dismissed, and there seems to be some validity to that. But it was kind of interesting. That is actually the gift that keeps on giving, Jaden Rashada. That was how we kicked off the offseason and into those summer workouts, and not exactly the news Gator fans needed. It didn't help, of course, that Florida really kind of had a dry spell of recruiting in May, June, and then into July. But finally, in mid-July, that did pick up, which we'll touch on in a future show here about some of the big recruiting wins that Florida has gotten. And if you want to go back, Neil has put out a lot of great content in the past couple of weeks, recapping some of those recruitments. So definitely check those out. But, as far as from a personnel standpoint and a roster management standpoint, Florida turned over nearly 40% of its scholarship athletes from 2023. That included 30 players either transferring, eligibility expiring, retiring from football, or entering the NFL draft. They brought in 31 scholarship players to their roster via the high school ranks and then also the transfer portal, and even one player internationally who reclassified to the 2024 class, and that was Enoch Wengoy. He was already in fall camp. Florida's actually added an additional player in as many in just the past couple of days too to add to that. So Florida has added several preferred walk-ons like Jason Zandamela, Hormani McClain, Caleb Rylos, who came from Air Force at tight end.
Are
So
we
Florida,
really going to consider Cormani a walk on though? Yeah, I know he is,
no.
but are we really going to talk
Well, I
about
mean,
it the
he,
same
by
way?
the letter of the law, he
Okay,
is a
fair enough.
preferred walk-on. Now, one of the other offseason stories that's come out recently, of course, is the fact that starting in the 2025-2026 academic calendar year, teams now for college ranks all now have more scholarship athletes, including football, with 20 additional scholarships going from 85 to 105. So a lot of those players who did transfer in, like Zandamela and McClain, who have 3 to 4 years of eligibility. Sorry about that. I don't know what happens. You're muted.
You're good. The last thing I got was you saying stuff like, something like, guys like Zandamela and McLean.
Okay.
That was the last thing I got. So just break.
Guys like Zandamela and McClain will be able to get on scholarship regardless if a player eventually leaves the program because for those 20 additional scholarships that are going to happen in the 2025 academic year. So this is a good move for the program to be able to bring these players in through NIL right now. They're able to be compensated and pay for school through that avenue. But of course, they'll eventually get on scholarship, whether that's through more attrition next offseason or when this new rule kicks in for the next academic year. So Florida, big changes in the offseason. There also were several position changes in the offseason. Florida's Gavin Hill, who came in one of Billy Napier's first classes, was a defensive tackle or defensive lineman, and now has moved over to tight end. That tight end room is stocked with depth, shall we say. Safety RJ Motton has switched to linebacker now to play what his father played in the 1980s here at the University of Florida. And journeyman Jamarcus Weston, who was a wide receiver, been a safety, is now an edge and is still on the team. And Damian George is now able to slide over to his more natural position, the guard. And this might be one of the more impactful position changes potentially going into fall camp is now that Damian George can play guard. We saw the tape last year. Unfortunately, he did struggle at tackle, looked out of position oftentimes. But now moving to guard, that's going to give Florida in more interior depth in that area of the offensive line and allow other guys who are naturally gifted to play at the tackle spot. So Damian George, great move to move him over there. And then some of the bigger additions kind of in the second after the spring camp, you got to talk about Elijah Badger. Elijah Badger is a guy who is going to probably start eventually here at Florida. I would say I would caution fans' optimism. I don't think he starts for the Miami game And that's mainly because he was not there during install in the spring camp. It's very difficult to come in at that time. And if you don't have the playbook then, you sort of are behind the eight ball from guys like Jim Dike, who is going to probably be receiver two behind Eugene Wilson the third, who obviously is already showing out in fall camp, showed out in the summer workouts, and showed out in spring. Another name that came in the spring who we're hearing a lot about is Asa Turner. Asa Turner, a big addition at the safety position. I don't think we need to recap again the horror stories of some of the safety play and the secondary play last season. The tape just tells the tale. Asa Turner, though, coming over from a national championship squad, a national runner-up in the Washington Huskies, played over 4 years of ball there coming to Florida. He probably is going to start at the safety position alongside potentially Trequezie Bridges, another transfer, and DJ Douglas, another transfer who got high praise in the spring and looks to be a major contributor this offseason. And of course, don't forget Jordan Castell. Jordan Castell, while he took his lumps as a freshman, we talked about that a lot last year on the show. Jordan Castell definitely is going to be a major factor in this rotation, and Bryce Thornton as well. And we've talked about it in the past. Safeties, they take their lumps in the SEC, but they can eventually contribute if they stay the course, get the right coaching. And Will Harris seems to be a lot more hands-on with these defensive backs, coaching the safeties and the corners. I'm looking forward to seeing the progress from those two particular players from this offseason's workouts and into fall camp. We'll await some more reports as they come in, but overall, I think major upgrade in the safety room by bringing in veteran leadership, which is something that was missing in the past with this team last year. There was a lot of young guys playing, and when you don't have that veteran leadership and experience, it shows on the field. These are guys that have played for programs that have played in big games. Asa Turner, as we mentioned, from Washington, Trequezie Bridges coming over from Oregon, and DJ Douglas did play in the Alabama program before he did go over to Tulane. He was a preferred walk-on at Alabama, was a scholarship athlete at Tulane, and then obviously a scholarship athlete now at the University of Florida. Don't be fooled by that because he definitely put on some great tape and was one of PFF's highest graded players out of the American Conference last season.
And
All
Tulane
right.
was good, by the way, when he was there. Like they won a Cotton Bowl. They beat USC in the
Yeah.
Cotton Bowl. So that's not, well, he came from the Conference USA. No, I mean, that was one of the better mid-major or group of five programs that were in the country that year. So put some
Yeah.
respect on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I really like it. I just like all the ads. I think these guys, but one of the things that I really like from them is that they can tackle. There's a want to tackle and, tackling. Um, I don't think, hopefully Neil doesn't have to tweet at players this year, or, when they respond to
No,
him.
no, 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 no. I
What
didn't
was I
tweet at
supposed to
him.
do?
No, 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 no. I did not tweet at him. He searched his own name
He did. No.
and he came into my mentions
Or, okay,
unread.
respond to players.
There we go.
Respond to players.
That's
Yeah.
more accurate. Okay.
Yes. Responding to players who, you know, we'll talk about that particular player later on, probably at another show as we get more in depth with fall camp. But definitely excited to see this room take a major step forward. And then the last position that I will highlight because I do think it is something important because it is a win for recruiting that finally came around, and that is the addition this past offseason of Grayson Howard at the linebacker. And you talk about a guy who's already played at South Carolina for a year, got the SEC experience, and is now coming over to Florida and projects to play probably and start against Miami because you've got two freshmen and Aaron Childs and Miles Graham who are definitely going to play this year, but it's going to take some time for them to get through all of the motions of the offseason and fall training camp and learning the playbook and understanding the install. Miles Graham was here in the spring. Aaron Childs was not here in the spring. And a lot of people are saying, had he been here in the spring, he probably would already be starting alongside Grayson Howard. But he's going to need that time, similar to Elijah Badger, as we mentioned before, needs just a little bit more time to understand that playbook and what's going on. But those guys are going to contribute in game one. And then I think they'll both likely start as the season goes on. And we talked after signing day, we talked about freshmen who we thought were going to make an impact. Both of us, I believe, mentioned Neil Grayson Howard. Or I'm sorry, not Grayson Howard. Aaron Childs was going to be a guy that was going to make a difference in this roster for this season. So
I think we
really
said
excited.
both, to be fair.
Yeah, no, we did. I think we said Miles Graham too, but I think I particularly pointed out Aaron Childs just because of his size. He's already coming in at 6'2", 235 pounds. That's an SEC middle linebacker, already ready to play from day one, just from a size and strength standpoint. And then once he learns the playbook and just the pure athleticism, he is going to be, I think, a guy that you could potentially talk about as an all conference for freshmen. Because it's gonna be hard to keep him off the field. So he's gonna make a difference as things goes on. So that really was the big additions this offseason. And there outside of that, the big stories, Neil, as we mentioned at the top, were the unfortunate Jaden Rashada situation. And then of course there was a dry spell in recruiting that did eventually pick up. We told fans to be patient, and I'm going to hat tip our recruiting handle. Neil and I have been doing some work there to get some more engagement with that one. We really appreciate the fans there. So if you're not already, make sure that you are following along at the In All Kinds of Weather recruiting handle. That's at IAKOW recruiting. And follow along there. We're going to have bigger updates in August because we've got two at least commitments coming that are pretty big targets for Florida. One of them, Nashawn Montgomery, who many believe is trending to Florida, potentially Ben Hanks Jr., another legacy for the Gators. So make sure you're not already follow along the IOKOW recruiting handle. But Neil, that was really the off season as it was. And going into fall camp, I think the mood has to be either two things. I think there's a segment of the fan base that is cautiously optimistic because we've heard a lot. Everybody knows last year Vegas over under was 5.5 wins. This year it's 4.5. I do believe that is a massive undervalue. We'll eventually talk about the schedule and what we think is going to happen, our predictions for this season. But you look at this roster, Florida flipped almost 40% of it. They brought in players at positions of need. We talked about the safety position. We talked about the linebacker room. We talked about the need to bring in another playmaker at the receiver position. Florida upgraded this roster in a lot of different areas. And I think there's a disconnect because people going into the season now, coming out of offseason, are all talking about Florida having the most difficult schedule in 2024. And they're looking at logos and they're looking at how the things have gone the last two seasons where Billy Napier is 11-14. They're not looking at the progress now that this roster, almost all 22 guys starting are players that Napier has brought in. And if we look at the past 2 years, the major contributors are either high school players or transfers that Napier has brought in. The talent evaluations have been there, and now this is the time to start to see us press forward and break through. Now, it's going to be difficult. Now, I'm not saying that the schedule is not difficult. It is. It is the number one most difficult schedule in the country. We're kicking off with a Miami Hurricanes team that has recruited similarly to Florida. They're right there neck and neck in the 247 composite talent rankings. And we all know that Miami has certainly had their fair share of victories on the recruiting trail and on the transfer portal over Florida the last 2 years. So that is going to be a difficult game. Right now, Vegas has Miami as a 2.5 point favorite. You got to like Florida's chances in almost a pick 'em game in the swamp. But then you look at a team like Texas A&M. You've got UCF now as a non-conference game. You don't have another cupcake outside of Sanford. You go on the road to Tennessee. You play Kentucky for homecoming. You obviously have the cocktail party in number one Georgia. Then you go to Texas, a playoff team. Then you have LSU and Ole Miss at home, both players or teams that are contenders, and then Florida State, who was almost a playoff team last year. So yeah, it is a difficult schedule when you go through it. But coming out of the offseason, I think the reason why people are down on Florida is they're looking at two things: results of the last 2 years and the difficulty of the schedule. I believe, though, we're going to see the major moves that we've made leading up to this season is going to result in a jump in a couple of wins. Now, I'm not saying Florida's going to win 10 plus games this season, but coming out, I think that we can confidently say that things are going to start to look up. And Neil, this is where I really want to get your thoughts on something you were kind of teasing it and you've been talking about it with me, is that eventually Florida's luck has to turn up. Florida has lost a ton of one possession games. in Billy Napier's time, believe you said that four out of the 14 losses, nine of them were one possession games. And out of those nine, seven of them were games that Florida led in at one point.
No. So the statistic is in 9 of the 14 losses, at some point in the fourth quarter, Florida either led, was tied, or was losing by a single possession. Some of those games turned
Okay.
out of hand. Like LSU last year, for example, Florida
Right.
lost by 3 scores, but they were only down three at one point in the fourth
And they
quarter.
led in the second half in
Yeah,
that
they
game.
did. They did. Right. But so the problem is finishing the fight, which I mean, I talked about that on the last show, the law of averages show. Also, just fun fact, I can't believe I didn't even mention this, but I spent more than an hour recording that show about all the terrible things that happened to Florida football. I didn't even mention Jaden Rashada. There's an hour of content without even talking about Jaden Rashada.
Thank God, finally.
That's how, but the point is that's how brutal it has been to be a Gator fan recently. And to the point about oh yeah, and 7 of the 9 teams that Florida lost to were less talented than Florida in the 247 Sports Composite. And that you can put an asterisk by that because some of those teams were clearly better. Like Missouri was a better football team. They're less talented, but they're a better football team. Utah is known for being fundamentally sound, but 247 Sports Composite says Florida's more talented than them. But Florida, it didn't work out for them that day. But games like Kentucky and Arkansas, twice and Arkansas at home and losing to Vanderbilt in his first year, that's the kind of stuff that's got to stop. You cannot lose to Kentucky again in the swamp. You cannot lose to a Central Florida at home. And don't tell me that, well, that's not going to happen. Well, we were South Florida putting the field goal down from going to overtime in that game, and they were a perfect 0-11 against the FBS that year. Now, I understand the talent has been upgraded, but I'll also say, well, as recently as last November, we lost to a team that we were more talented than. So that's kind of where I go, all right, well, my thesis of the last show has to kick in here. The law of averages states that Florida's not going to keep losing all of these games that they're in the fourth quarter, particularly when you think about the reasons why teams forget the Gators, like forget Florida Gators even exist. If you see like football team A or just a random high school team or football team X or Y or whatever, you see a pattern of them continuing to lose games in the fourth quarter. One of the first things you probably think of is the strength program must be lacking because they're in the game in the fourth quarter, but they keep getting bulldozed in that fourth quarter and losing games, or in some cases, they're in the game and they're losing by a score, and the other team blows it open and wins by a much bigger margin, like it happened to LSU last year. Well, Georgia in 2022 was, I mean, technically Georgia scored with 35 seconds to go in the third quarter, but the point holds for that one. Georgia blew that one open in the fourth quarter too. And it's an issue that Florida has addressed this year because they first went and got Craig Fitzgerald. That didn't last very long, but clearly there was some blueprint that was laid down there that Tyler Miles was able to follow. And we've seen the results. We've seen the guys posting pictures of themselves on Twitter and Instagram, whatever. You can see they look a little bit different. There's clearly something different that's happening than was happening in the first couple of years under Mark Hockey. And you look at that and you look at the talent that's come in, and I think you have to feel at least cautiously good because I mean, for the returning guys, the guys that are back from last year, I don't think that any of them are not ready to step it up. And like that's obvious to say in some ways, but I mean, we kind of also felt that after 22 and got burned thinking that. But this time we're seeing those results in strength and conditioning to back those good feelings up. And the guys seem hungry. Some of them we know for a fact, dude. Like we've had Cam Jackson on our show. We know what he's about. We know he puts the work in. We know Graham Mertz is a true leader. We've seen him do that. We have seen Shamar James lead by example and lead by his production. We have reason to trust those guys. So that's reason to feel good. And then you have the infusion of both talent and experience, and in some cases, both in the same players. The talent infusion comes with guys like Jameer Grimsley, DeAndre Robinson, Miles Graham, Jaden Baugh, DJ Lagway, LJ McCray, Aaron Childs, and so on, and so TJ Abrams, and so on and so on. And the experience infusion comes with guys like a Joey Slackman, Asa Turner, DJ Douglas, Elijah Badger, and on and on and on. And Brandon Crenshaw Dixon on the offensive line. You can go on and on and on and on and on. The point is, the talent's been increased, the experience has been increased, and I'd like to think that the work ethic has been increased just simply because of the new voice in the strength and conditioning program. So, yeah, you kind of have to feel good. Now, add that on to the law of averages, and yeah, you kind of have to.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, law of averages, I agree. You still have to make decisions, though, that lead to a higher probability of success and a higher return of expected value. And I don't
Sure.
think there's been times in the last, we've talked about, there's been times in the last 2 years, decisions have been made where we've hurt ourselves, shot ourselves in the foot, and it's increased the likelihood that more bad things are going to happen. The one thing I will say, because you did bring up the strength gains over the offseason, the Gators now have 45 players who can lift 300 pounds in the power clean. They only had 15 when they went into the offseason. So they have tripled that number from the offseason to now.
There you go. And
Flo-
that's a tangible result. That's not BSing ourselves. That's not looking at a certain picture taken from a flattering angle. That's a feasible result that we have.
couple more. The average squat is now up to 425. It was 365 at the beginning. Florida have two players who can run 23 miles an hour. They have 15 who could run 22, 43 can run 21, and 63 can run 20. So you're talking about nearly the entire, over two-thirds of our roster can run over 20 miles an hour. Miles, said that going into it, they really only had a handful of players going into the offseason that could even run 22 miles an hour. So we have gotten so much faster, so much stronger. Now you've got to put it on the field and put it to the test against the best competition, like we talked about at earlier in the show. So it's going to be, I'm excited going into this fall camp. I'm really excited to hear what we're going to see, what's the finished product after 3 weeks, and then we go into the install before the Miami game. It is an exciting time. I'm coming in cautious. I'm one of those fans that's cautiously optimistic that things are going to turn around for the Gators in fall camp going into this season, and we're going to see a massive improvement that will help Napier going into a big fourth year. I think a lot of fans think this is the year potentially that he could get fired. He could get fired. But I really believe we're looking at a 4-year build here, and this is the year where we really start to turn the corner. But we'll talk about that in future shows. And I definitely want to go ahead and bring it up now because we're teasing the offseason. We're talking about the offseason. We're teasing fall camp. I want to tease our state of the program show, which we will be recording upcoming this week. We do have our two confirmed guests. I don't want to announce it quite yet, but these are two really great people. You'll know them when you see them. And it's going to be a fantastic show that a lot of the fans are going to want to get behind. So, but in order to see that, you got to be subscribed, like this show, follow along. Make sure you're subscribed on the audio podcast platforms, whatever you listen to, Spotify or Apple or any of the other ones out there, to hear that show because it is always a great show when we have it. So, Neil, that about wraps it up here, recapping the offseason, priming us for a great Gators fall camp. And with all that, this is Chris Yanes, your host, Neil Schulman, signing off here at the All Kinds Weather Forecast. We look forward to a fantastic fall camp.